Everyone's already seated, so I can't say, would everyone please take your seat? All right, now we'll start off with the presentation of the colors, the pipes and drums. Let's give a round of applause to Jeff Sandlin, the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office, Pipes and Drums. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Bob Hendon, President of the Library's Board of Trustees. On behalf of the library staff, I'm pleased to welcome all of you to the library's 65th Annual Veterans Day Commemoration. We're here this morning to pay special tribute to our veterans and honor all members of the armed forces. These dedicated men and women steadfastly serve our country in wartime and in peacetime and continue to protect us while serving the military today. Would everyone please continue standing for the presentation of colors by Diamond Oaks Junior ROTC.
Present, halt! Order, halt! Left, place! Present, halt!
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for the Star-Spangled Banner performed by 5K Brass. You may be seated. At this time, I would like to introduce several special guests who are joining us today. Please stand as you are introduced. First, I would like to introduce my fellow library trustees, Monica Donath Cohen and Elizabeth Lamacchia. I would also like to extend special thanks to the Friends of the Public Library and the Library Programs Fund for their outstanding support, not only for this program, but also for the many others they make possible throughout the year. Here representing the Friends of the Public Library is Jim Jones, and a member of the organization's Board of Directors. And now I would like to introduce Paula Bram-Heger, the Eva Jane Romaine Coombe Director of the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County.
Thank you, Mr. Hendon, and thank to all of you for coming down and sharing your Veterans Day morning with us. The library has a long and proud tradition of supporting and honoring veterans for their service. This building was built actually in the mid-1950s, and it is dedicated to the Hamilton County residents who lost their lives in combat. As a matter of fact, our Book of Homage is on display, and it contains the names of nearly 3,000 veterans who have died while defending our freedom from World War I to the present. Facsimiles are actually available to anyone who would like one. After the program, you can pick one up. The main library is also the home to the USS Cincinnati exhibit located behind you and features artifacts from 5 military ships bearing our city's name. Finally, we would like to note that we have been proud to host this Veterans Day program every year for 65 years, which means we have 65 really impressive keynote speakers in our history. They've and all of our veterans who have attended this program each year inspire us. So we wanted to do something this year to note our inspiration and thanks. We put together a very short video to share our appreciation, which we will show now before we continue with our program. Thank you. This is Paula Bram-Heger, the library's Eva Jane Romaine Coombe Library Director. I wanted to welcome our veterans today and thank you very deeply for your service to our country.
Thank you, veterans, for your service. We appreciate everything you've done for us, and we love you.
I want to say thank you to the men and women that's protecting our country. I just want to say thank you, and I salute y'all, and God bless.
I just wanted to thank all our veterans for all of their hard work, effort, blood, sweat, and tears. Personally, both my grandfather and my uncle were in the military. My grandfather in World War II in Italy, and my uncle was in Vietnam in the reserves for 30 years. So talking to my uncle, it's quite a calling. So I don't think all of our men and women in the service get all the appreciation they deserve, so thank you.
I want to give a special thanks to the veterans that's been here for our country and that's made it possible for us to enjoy the freedom that we got today.
This is a huge shout out to all of our veterans. Thank you for your service. We appreciate everything you do.
I just wanted to say that I'm so grateful to the men and women who serve our country and protect our freedoms every day. I personally know an officer who puts his life on the line every day as a police officer who also served our country, and they have a very difficult job, and we appreciate everything they do to keep us safe.
I'd like to thank all the veterans that served this God-given country. Thank you, veterans.
Thank you all so much for your service to our country. We all really appreciate it.
Our library prides itself on open access to information for our customers and the freedom that we have in this country to offer it. But that freedom would not be possible without you. The courage and dedication that you display every day help to keep our country and the rest of the world safe. Thank you for always putting our needs ahead of your own and for being willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. You are my heroes.
Thank you for all you do, and I hope you live a better life for every one of us.
And thank you for your service to our country. We really appreciate having you here and enjoying this day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping us safe.
That was produced by our staff here at the library. These people have exceptional talent, and if you need something, just go ask one of them for help. They will be glad to help you. It is our great privilege today to honor our veterans who have protected our freedom in their duty, courage, and selflessness service. We're approximately 45,000 veterans currently residing in Hamilton County. We would like to recognize those of you among us today who have given themselves in service to our country. Our veterans, active duty service members, guards, and reservists, your sacrifices and those of your families have helped keep our country safe and free. At this time, I would like to invite all those who are currently serving in active military duty be recognized. Would the veterans who served in World War II please stand as you're able? I don't think we have anybody. Oh, Would the veterans who served in the Korean War now please stand? Would the veterans who served in Vietnam please stand? Would all the veterans who served in Iraq and Afghanistan please stand? Would all veterans of our armed forces now please stand? On behalf of all of us here today, thank you for your service. Please be seated. We would now like to recognize each branch of the United States military, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard. 5K Brass will play the Armed Forces Medley, and we ask that you stand as you're able as we recognize as your service song is played. Thank you, that was great. I would like to encourage all the veterans in attendance today to consider participating in the Veteran History Project. The Veterans History Project, which is coordinated by the Library of Congress, collects firsthand accounts of those who defend the United States during wartime. As an official partner of this project, library staff recruits veterans, volunteer interviewers, records interviews, and sends duplicate copies of these interviews to the Library of Congress. Our Veterans History channel on our YouTube page features nearly 600 locally recorded interviews, documented materials, and video streamed versions of selected interviews. Staff from the Genealogy and Local History Department will be available after today's event to answer questions and sign veterans up for interviews. If you haven't had an interview, please do it. It's important. All right, and now it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, good friend of mine. He lives right up the street from me. Dr. Robert Hamilton was born in St. Petersburg, Florida, but grew up in Cleveland. He graduated from University School in 1964 and attended Center College, graduating with a double major in history and government. He also achieved the rank of Second Lieutenant of the United States Marine Corps. In August of 1968, Dr. Hamilton reported to flight school in Pensacola, Florida, where he was awarded his Wings of Gold in October 1969. Dr. Hamilton transitioned to the Army and was sent to Vietnam with Marine Light Helicopter Squadron 367. In August of 1970, he was shot down once and was awarded 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 50 Air Medals, and the Navy Achievement Medal with Combat 5. Upon returning to the States, Dr. Hamilton spent 3 years as a flight instructor in Pensacola while taking science courses at the University of West Florida. In 1974, he was accepted at Case Western Reserve University Dental School, and the following year he was awarded a Navy scholarship. After graduation, Dr. Hamilton spent 2 years in Guam aboard the USS Hundley, USS Protectus, before being selected for a 3-year oral and maxillofacial surgery residency. After his residency, Dr. Hamilton served as dental department head aboard the USS Midway, which was home ported in Yokosuka, Japan, for 2 years, and then he was head of oral and maxillofacial surgery at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton and Naval Regional Dental Care Pensacola. While in Pensacola, he volunteered for Operation Desert Storm. Dr. Hamilton retired from the Navy in 1992 and moved to Cincinnati, where he entered private practice. He made trips to Honduras to perform oral surgery and was inducted in the Ohio Military Hall of Fame for valor in 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, please join in welcoming Dr. Robert Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Hendon, and welcome to everyone this morning. 1 year ago today was a Sunday, and we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. I had the distinct honor of being selected to climb the bell tower at church with a special friend of mine, Sarah Watson, and to ring the bell in the tower at 11 o'clock for 1 minute and 11 seconds. And this was to commemorate the end of World War I on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. It was the war to end all wars, the Great War. Actually, that wasn't the official end of World War I. It was in 1919 that the Treaty of Versailles was signed, and that was the official end of World War I. In 1938, Congress passed legislation and made November 11th a national holiday, and it was named Armistice Day. Under President Eisenhower in 1954 in the 83rd Congress, with pressure from many veterans groups, that act was amended. And the word armistice was removed and the word veterans was inserted so that that day would honor all veterans, not just the end of World War I. In 1968, the Uniformed Holidays Bill was passed. This is when we created a lot of three-day weekends. We took George Washington and Abraham Lincoln's birthday in February and we made President's Day. A lot of other holidays now were on Monday. And Veterans Day was designated as the fourth Monday in October. There were a lot of states that were not happy with this. A lot of veterans groups were not happy with this. They felt that it was losing its historical significance. So in 1975, Gerald Ford made November 11th Veterans Day in perpetuity, or until Congress changes its mind again. Some significance in some of the dates I've given you. We celebrated a year ago the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. This year, we celebrated the 75th anniversary of D-Day, the great amphibious landing into Europe that gave us a foothold to go on and defeat the Third Reich. 25 years difference between the end of World War I and D-Day. In 1950, we became involved in Korea. From 50 to 53, 5 years after the end of World War II. 2 years later, we became involved in Vietnam. The actual start of the Vietnam conflict was in 1955 when we started sending advisors to the South Vietnamese government. And on August 1st of this year was the 18th anniversary of the beginning of the war in Afghanistan. So the concept of World War I being the war to end all wars is a significant myth. I've known a lot of people that said they don't like history. History was always a matter of memorizing dates, and I've thrown a lot of dates at you. But I look at dates as a paperclip on the pages of time, designating certain people, certain events that should be remembered. In 1775, the Continental Congress established the Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps. Our military is under control of the elected Congress and executive departments of our government. Our branches of our military have fought for 244 years to support and defend the concepts laid out in our Constitution. 244 years ago, the radical concepts of a government were formulated under the concept of we the people. And the first 10 amendments to follow were the Bill of Rights, rights granted to all of us. All inductees into the military swear an oath to this, what was then an experimental form of government. This is what veterans have done and will continue to do, support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I respect and salute all veterans. For one reason or another, they made a conscious decision to enlist in the military, to forego their present activities, and to give back and to serve their country. They may have become a truck driver, an IT specialist, a pilot, or a grunt, but they made a difference, and they can justifiably and proudly claim that. I attended Center College in Danville, Kentucky. When I reported in the fall of 1964, I was assigned to Dr. Charles Robert Lee, a history professor, and I was his advisee. And Dr. Lee charted my education toward law school, which is what I wanted at that time. Dr. Lee was a Marine in Korea. Dr. Lee was wounded in one hip and out the other, medevaced out of Korea to Japan, Hawaii, the West Coast, and Bethesda, and was told he would never walk again. His first day in a wheelchair at Bethesda, he got up and he decided, I think it's time to start feeling sorry for myself. He did that for 24 hours and he said it was no fun whatsoever and it just made everybody around him miserable. So he took a positive approach, went back to the University of North Carolina and earned his PhD in history. Because of the person that Dr. Lee was and that I got to know, that's what influenced me to join the Marine Corps. He had every reason to be bitter with the Marine Corps for what it had done to his life. His brother was a Marine, his father was a Marine. When we did a Civil War course down at Perryville Battlefield, he wore his old Marine Corps uniform. He did walk. He walked tall and he walked proud. And I figured there was something in there that was special, and I wanted to get that. You might notice I have a love for history. I even read a book entitled The History of Marine Corps Aviation in World War II. Now, if you want a mass of dates and statistics, try to wade your way through that one, put out by the government printing press. In preparing for this presentation this morning, I contacted one of my best friends in the military. He was best man at our wedding. And he sent me a story that I think is very appropriate. In 2005, there was a teacher in Little Rock, Arkansas, named Martha Cothran. And Martha went to her superintendent and went to her principal and asked permission to do things a little bit differently this year on the first day of school. And when students walked in for first period, they found something different. There were no desks in her room. And Martha said to them, "You can't have a desk until you tell me how you earn the right to sit at a desk." And the students were a little befuddled, and they sat there and they said, "Well, it's our grades." She said, "No, it has nothing to do with your grades." And they said, "It's our behavior." She said, "No, it has nothing to do with your behavior. We expect good behavior. That's part of being a student at this school." So this went on all day. First period, second period. Students were starting to call home and tell their parents about this crazy history teacher. So reporters and TV stations were showing up at the school. And it came around to last period. And the students came in and sat on the floor, and she asked them the same question: what gives you the right to sit at the desk? And they didn't have an answer. So she went over, opened the door, and in walked 27 veterans, each one carrying a desk, and put them in place and lined up on the wall. And she said, "You didn't earn the right to sit at these desks. These ladies and gentlemen did it for you. They went halfway around the world interrupting their education, their careers, and their families so that you can have the freedoms that you have. It's now your responsibility to study hard, to work hard, and to pass on your knowledge of history and the sources of our freedoms." This is a true story. Mrs. Cothran's father was a POW in World War II, and she was elected Teacher of the Year in 2006 for the state of Arkansas by the Veterans of Foreign Wars. So what Mrs. Cothran is saying is to learn history and to teach history. Learn the important events that made this country and teach them to children and grandchildren. You're sitting in one of the amazing places and great resources to do that. As Mr. Hendon mentioned, the video library that they're creating here with people like Ray Hughes, that I know through the Hornet Group, is going to be something that will last forever, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren beyond that can come back and look at their family's military history. If you're going to take a trip, you don't have to center it maybe on history, but make it part of that trip. Go to San Antonio and enjoy the Riverwalk. Take a trip to the Alamo. If you get to Hawaii, do not miss Pearl Harbor and the Arizona Memorial. Go to Washington, D.C. See the amazing museums and statues and monuments that are a major part of our history. And if you ever get to Europe, go to the beaches at Normandy. It's a surreal experience. Roger and I were there, and to watch people on the beach, on blankets, eating lunch with their children playing in the surf, was a little surreal to imagine what happened there on June 6, 1944. Locally, we have Harrison's tomb and a lot of Harrison history right here in Cincinnati. On the east side, in Batavia, we have the Tri-State Warbird Museum, a wonderful museum of vintage aircraft and a lot of history, and a wonderful introductory video with a few people that you may have heard of before that have local ties. Neil Armstrong, John Glenn, and George Griffin, who was one of the Doolittle's Raiders. Tom Griffin, excuse me. So again, learn, teach, and pass on the events and lives of patriots. Science and technology have expanded our capabilities beyond belief in the last 116 years. On December 17, 1903, the Wright brothers performed the first manned flight at Kitty Hawk. Since that time, we've gone through prop aircraft, jet aircraft, rockets and missiles, rockets to the moon, men on the moon, and now exploring deep space. And now we have unmanned vehicles. In that same amount of time, science and technology have developed ways to maim and kill the human body. At the same time, many technical devices and procedures have been formed to help save that same delicate body. Quick access to level 1 trauma, amazing surgeons and nurses, equipment, material, and medications. There are now many people surviving with prostheses that would not have survived in earlier times. I salute their sacrifice and their daily battles. Are there any Blue Star families here today? A Blue Star family is someone who has a family member on active duty in the military. And I can't imagine the anxiety of having a spouse, a child, or another family member in a combat area. When I was in Vietnam, my mother worked in a small brokerage firm in Cleveland. She came back from lunch one day, and sitting in the waiting area was a Marine Corps major in full uniform. She went to one knee and about lost it. They helped her up. Marine Corps major came over, he was beside himself. He was there to conduct financial business. But my mother about lost it. Are there any Gold Star families here? The Gold Star family is a family who has lost someone while on active duty in the military. There can be nothing more devastating, more gut-wrenching than when a family receives news of the loss of a loved one. I've known families like this, and I've been at a loss for words. And the best thing I was able to come up with was, "I'm here for you." And I got feedback later that that was very meaningful. There was a young man named Chris who weighed 316 pounds. And Chris wanted to serve his country. He went to the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force to try to enlist, and they turned him away. He didn't meet the weight, height standards. He went into the Marine Corps, and the staff sergeant recruiter was there, and he said, "Chris, you don't meet our standards either. But I can see you have a passion." He reached in his drawer and he pulled out a diet, a high-protein, low-carbohydrate diet, and told Chris if he wanted to be in the Marine Corps, he had to do a complete lifestyle change. The staff sergeant said, "I exercise every morning at 6 o'clock. He said, "I'll come pick you up if you want to join me." 7 months later, Chris weighed 198 pounds. He was inducted into the Marine Corps, and he went to Afghanistan. Unfortunately, Chris became the victim of an IED. At his funeral back in the United States, a reporter approached his mother and said, "What a shame. If Chris hadn't lost all that weight, he'd still be alive today." His mother said, "I will always love my son. I will miss him forever." But Chris had a passion. He loved his country. He gave his life doing what he believed in. Being in combat and taking fire is a unique experience. You build bonds with people that last decades. I was fortunate enough to fly the Cobra in Vietnam. We were the cat's meow at that time, the most sophisticated helicopter going. Model T compared to what's going on now. And I learned a lot of things. I remember in flight school, our instructors would tell us that when you were taking fire from a .50 caliber machine gun at night, it looked like a slow motion burning beer can coming at you. What a better analogy a Marine could come up with. When I left Vietnam, I went back to Pensacola, became a flight instructor, and I can remember sitting up late at night watching the return of the Vietnam Vietnam POWs. My buddy Woody, who sent me the story about Martha Cawthron, got a flyer from a friend of his who was from Niagara Falls, New York, named Dave Freese. And it was a picture of Dave standing in front of Niagara Falls with a beer can in his hand saying, "No day's a bad day for a former POW." We had a gentleman named Bruce Archer who joined our squadron. And needless to say, Bruce didn't really want to talk about it a lot. The only thing that I ever heard Bruce say was the worst part was listening to the screams of his comrades when they were being interrogated and tortured. In 1973, when the POWs returned, Tony Orlando had just come out with a record. Remember records, those little round things we used to play? Tie a Yellow Ribbon. And it had just come out, and he was at the studio one day, and his agent said, "Tony, there's a call for you from Bob Hope." He says, "Oh yeah, right, Bob Hope's calling me." So he answered the phone. He said, "Who is this really?" He says, "Tony, it's Bob Hope." And he said, "We're having a big party at the Cotton Bowl for the POWs. I want you down there. I want you to sing your song." So, "Mr. Hope, nobody knows this song. It's only been out 2 weeks." He said, "Well, we've got 2 weeks till that party, and I'll guarantee you by the time you get there, that song's going to be #1. It was. So Tony Orlando and Dawn got up, performed Tie a Yellow Ribbon. And everybody's hooting and hollering and clapping. And Tony noticed one gentleman in the front row who just sat there, didn't move. And when the show was over, he approached Bob Hope and he said, "Mr. Hope, did I do something to offend this man?" And Bob Hope said, "Well, I don't know, let's go ask him." So they walked up to him, and Tony Orlando said to this gentleman, "Sir, I'm sorry you didn't enjoy the show. Was there anything that I did wrong?" He said, "Oh, no, not at all." He said, "My name's John McCain, and they tore out my shoulders, but my toes were going a mile a minute." So I left the Marine Corps and went to dental school, served on multiple ships. In 1990, I was in Pensacola by myself. We weren't able to sell our house in California. I went to a movie on a Thursday afternoon and came out, turned on the radio, and listened to Wolf Blitzer describe the first bombings in Iraq. I went into the clinic that next day and said, "Put my name on the list for Desert Storm. I'm already separated from my family. Why send somebody else?" So we wound up in Bahrain. We were a special group, the Taro group. We were going to backfill the Gator freighters when the Marines made an amphibious assault into Kuwait and turned them into operating rooms and ICUs. And fortunately, that event never happened. But while we were sitting there in Bahrain waiting for that, there was an EMT physician in our group. And we had about 70 people in our group of physicians, nurses, corpsmen, and one lonely oral surgeon. But this EMT physician came to me and he said, "I want to carry a weapon. I want to be armed." And I looked him in the eye and I said, "Over my dead body are you getting a weapon?" From that moment on, that gentleman was known as Frank Burns. I'll finish with one last story, and it's a story of motivation. When I left the Marine Corps, I had to check out at multiple places in Pensacola, and the last place to check out was the senior Marine, Colonel Fleming. This was on a Tuesday, and I was due to start dental school on Thursday. So I was meeting with him at 1400, 2 o'clock, and was to depart Pensacola for Cleveland at 1600, 4 o'clock, and be in school at 8 o'clock on Thursday morning. I expected to walk into Colonel Fleming's office, be told to have a seat. Thank you for your service. Good luck to you in what your future endeavors are. And that's exactly what did not happen. I went in the building. There was a desk with a warrant officer outside who was his aide. Was told to have a seat. And the aide called Colonel Fleming and told him that I was here. He said, have him wait. So I did. Finally, he came across the intercom, send him in. So I went in, and the formal approach is to bang 3 times on the door sill. Wait to be told to come in, stand at attention in front of his desk. Captain Hamilton reporting as ordered, sir. He sat down, he was sitting down, he looked up over his readers, reached out, I handed him my papers. Still at attention, was never given parade rest, at ease, or anything. He said, you young guys come in here and you try to pull this crap. He said, you want to get out of the Marine Corps and you think you're going to find something better. I'll tell you, you're not. And you're going to try to get back in the Marine Corps, and I'm going to make sure you don't. I took one step back, did an about face, and left the office. I looked at the warrant officer sitting at the desk outside the colonel's office, and he just put his head back and rolled his eyes. That may have been one of the best things that happened to me. I went to dental school with minimum background, studied with a dictionary the first year, but I was bound to determine that SOB was not going to win. And I made it through. People have said, well, do you think maybe he did that on purpose and to give you that motivation? No way. So one last thought, back to learn and teaching history. Do not leave your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren sitting on the floor in history class. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah, top that. That's right. I quit. Good night, everybody. And now, 5K Brass will play the Liberty Bell March by John Philip Sousa. Thank you. Each year, our Hamilton County veterans are remembered here at the main library with memorial wreaths presented by local veterans organizations. Sergeant Dave Cortlett and Sergeant Carr Shercliffe will present our first wreath on behalf of the Cincinnati Police Department. Samuel Finley and Carol Quackenbush will present a wreath for the Greater Cincinnati chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. Our next wreath will be presented by Jules Camerati on the behalf of the Greater Cincinnati Women's American Legion Post 640. James Kennedy and David Callahan will present a wreath on behalf of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, Chapter 3620. Our final wreath will be presented on behalf of the USS Hornet Breakfast Group, which will be presented by Ray Hughes. Thank you for being with us this morning to present your reorganizations. Please be seated. For more than 240 years, our brave fighting men and women have protected our freedom and their duty, courage, and selfless service. In line of heroines continues broken today. Currently, there are approximately 2 million active and reserve personnel serving the United States Armed Forces. The legacy of our veterans continues to inspire our military to answer the call of duty. We know that freedom isn't free and that eternal vigilance is the price we must pay for our liberty. At this time, we would like to light the flame of remembrance and pay our tribute and respects to those who have laid down their lives and for those who suffered in the hope of peace for all. Here once again, this time to light the flame of remembrance, are Samuel Finley and Carol Quackenbush, represent the Greater Cincinnati chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. Thank you. Thank you. This will bring our 65th Veterans Day commemoration to a close. Light refreshments will be served in the atrium. The keepsake tiles made in our marker space are also available for anyone who'd like one. Thank you for joining us and have a great day.
My name is Christopher Smith. I'm a reference librarian here in the public library, and I'm here with Jerry Model. I'm retired from the U.S. Navy and also a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. He was kind enough to donate his collection of 101 years of yearbooks. called the Lucky Bag from the U.S. Naval Academy. And we have some very special copies on display here, and we have every copy. So if you ever need to look at a yearbook from the U.S. Naval Academy, we have it.
I will say one thing. I would not have donated them had it not been for Chris Smith, because he was the right man at the right library at the right time, and I'm very, very grateful to him. But it is true, I collected these Lucky Bags for many, many years. The first one was 1894, and eventually this got to be too much. I mean, they literally weigh a ton, you know, going back, literally a ton. And Chris is going to take good care of them for us, and that's really the reason why I ended up donating them. But there's a lot of history here, you know, presidents, admirals, famous football players, and I've really enjoyed making a collection. I'm happy that I'm able to donate them to Chris.
Thank you, Jerry.
The 1922 Lucky Bag. That was the year that Admiral Rickover graduated. And I don't want to mention any names, but 1922, the story was that Admiral Rickover, the father of the nuclear navy, that his biography, his graduation biography, was put on a perforated page. There was a lot of anti-Semitism at the time, and the story was that if you didn't like Admiral Rickover, you could remove his page. Well, in fact, there was a perforated page, but it wasn't Admiral Rickover. It was another fellow who was Jewish. He was highly discriminated against by another midshipman who happened to be the Class 5 striper, #1 in his class, and the editor-in-chief of Lucky Bag. And what he did is came up with a very negative biography in the Lucky Bag that included not only a picture, but a very anti-Semitic negative cartoon. It was a huge stink in 1922. There was literally a congressional investigation, and the crazy thing is that the perpetrator of this, I won't mention his name, he died a year after graduation. And so it was a huge, huge scandal at the time. And but Admiral Rickover ended up becoming the father of the nuclear navy and all of our nuclear submarines.
The first USS Cincinnati was an ironclad river gunboat commissioned in 1862. It was sunk twice in battle and raised twice. It was sold in 1866. The second USS Cincinnati was a C-7 protected cruiser in service from 1894 to 1919. The third USS Cincinnati was a CL-6 light cruiser commissioned in 1924. This ship patrolled the Atlantic Ocean during World War II and was scrapped in 1946. That ship's bell is in the lobby of the downtown main library. It's a focal point for the USS Cincinnati display. Recently, a former crew member for the fourth USS Cincinnati, a 360-foot Los Angeles-class nuclear attack submarine, came down to share his memories of his time on board.
Hi, my name is Scott Lucas. I was born on the west side. I went to Coleraine. I was on the submarine SSN 693. I was a radioman third class, and when I left, I was a radioman second class.
For Lucas, the opportunity to serve his country in a submarine was the chance of a lifetime.
There was only two kind of ships when I was in the Navy. Either you were a target or you're a submarine.
The USS Cincinnati SSN 693 submarine was launched in 1977 and commissioned in 1978. The vessel weighed nearly 7,000 tons and carried a crew of 13 officers and 120 enlisted men. It was in service until 1996.
When you first got on, I learned to drive the boat, which was doing the dive planes. You would learn to take the up and down the different depths. And we had 6 radiomen on board, so we only needed 3 when we were on watch. I qualified to work in sonar to help fill in over there, so I was a sonar tech and a radioman tech.
The 5th Navy vessel to share the Queen City's name is a littoral combat ship that was commissioned in 2019.
You know, people ask me, I said I was in the Navy, they said, what do you do? I said I was on submarines, and then I said I was on the U.S. Cincinnati. Oh, you were? That was probably pretty cool.
And it's pretty cool that the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County has an exhibit showcasing images and artifacts from all the USS Cincinnati ships. The objects in this exhibit are the property of the Naval History and Heritage Command and the Department of the Naval Supply Systems Command. You can learn more about all the ships named Cincinnati by visiting the exhibit on the first floor of the South Building at the downtown main library.